Hey, my name is Dr. Dana Wasserman, and welcome to Tough Talk with Dr. Dana. Welcome to Facebook Live. Today's tough topic is going to be about anxiety in the time of COVID-19. But before we start, I need to read our disclaimer once again, so please pay attention because it is important. I'm legally required to tell you that I'm not providing psychological services, and this is not intended to treat, diagnose, or cure any psychological issues you may have. I will be sure to honor your questions so that if necessary, you will know better when to seek help. An additional part of the disclaimer will be right below me, so please give that a read as well because it's really quite important. Now let's get on to some anxiety. Well, we're certainly talking a lot about anxiety these days, particularly in the time of COVID-19, because there's a lot to be anxious about, frankly. So I looked on Google, and there are more articles and more websites about anxiety and COVID-19 than I knew what to do with. So I didn't want to necessarily repeat with what's already out there. So I'm going to give my own about 15-minute spin, hopefully not too much of a didactic yawn fest, of course. So let's get started. First of all, what exactly is anxiety? Let's talk about that, okay? Anxiety is an anticipation of a future threat. And what it is an internal warning system we have deep within our brains, the amygdala to be exact, that alerts us to danger or other threats, and it prepares our bodies physically to fight or escape danger. And this is the fight, flight, freeze phenomenon that we have no real control over. That's deep within our minds. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're out in the wild just because, and a really wily leopard sets his eyes on you. Well, you have a couple of very unconscious, biologically driven choices to make. You can either fight said leopard, which would make for interesting viewing. You could either flee, which would be flight, which means you would run like mad and hopefully you could outrun said leopard, or you would freeze and hopefully that the leopard would get bored and simply leave. That we don't necessarily have control of. And I say this because we all have anxiety to a certain extent. It is ingrained within us. It is nothing to be ashamed of. It is something, though, to watch if it becomes unmanageable. Let's talk about that. In fact, let's look at the difference between manageable versus unmanageable anxiety, okay? Some anxiety can be incredibly helpful. It can be energizing. It can be motivating. Let me give you an example. Doing this Facebook Live is a classic example for me of a motivating anxiety. I become very anxious before I come on. My heart pounds, my mouth gets dry, my stomach churns. But on the other hand, I also know there's excitement there because I know I'll be communicating, hopefully some really good communication. And I feel good after I'm done. So there is a manageable anxiety. And it also speaks to even exciting situations can be inherently stressful. It makes me think of college graduation or high school graduation. We can look back and think how exciting that time was, but how incredibly stressful as well, because we are trying to navigate our immediate futures, and that's incredibly anxiety provoking. So again, anxiety has its purpose. It doesn't have to be seen as all bad per se. Now, to cap, normal anxiety, it's related to a specific problem or a situation. It lasts only as long as the situation or the problem lasts. It's proportional to the situation or the problem, okay? And it's a realistic response to a realistic problem or situation. So I think that getting nervous before doing a Facebook Live in front of how many people can be pretty anxiety provoking. And I noticed that my anxiety ends pretty much when I push the off button, okay? And it is related specifically to the fact that I am doing a form of public speaking. Even though I can't see my audience, I know there's an audience out there. That's also anxiety provoking for me. So the next question is, when does it become a problem? When does anxiety make us go, oh, geez, something's going on here? Well, if you have worry, okay, and if it's excessive, meaning you can't control the worry, that the worry just sort of takes you over and consumes you, that's something to think about. You might feel restless and edgy. You might feel irritable. You might have problems with sleep, typically in the form of insomnia. You might have impaired concentration, in which, if you think about it, it's really hard to concentrate on a task if your mind is consumed with whatever anxiety you're thinking about. There's also muscle tension. I have very, very large trapezius muscles right here. And it's not because I do any kind of particular exercise. It's because I hold my anxiety like this up here. Okay? These are very, very common symptoms of anxiety. Now, if these symptoms cause a kind of interference in your daily functioning, if they interfere with, say, work or your relationships, then it's not a bad idea to seek out some assistance and get some relief. There's nothing wrong with that. There is no shame with getting help if your anxiety has gotten the best of you. So I want to talk about now how anxiety relates to COVID-19, because there's a specificity here we can't ignore. And if you think about it, COVID-19 really speaks to an uncertain future. We really don't know what's happening from day to day unless we get our daily briefings from whatever news channel that we watch. We worry about our own health and the health of our loved ones. We have concerns around school and work, finances and community and friendships. It can become all consuming. So I tell you this because these are normal anxieties to have around a pandemic. Of course, you're going to feel these things if you do. However, too much anxiety can cause harm, and it may look like this. You may feel stressed out and fearful on the daily. You wake up and you go to sleep and you're stressed out and you're fearful because of COVID-19. You might actually find yourself demanding more medical care and medical tests than necessary. Or you might have increasing fears of stockpiling certain supplies, even though those supplies have become recently replenished. That's when you know that your anxiety, again, is getting the best of you. Or, interestingly enough, you might swing back to the other end of the spectrum, and it might look like denial. That's classic, that what we would call a defense against something. So our anxiety, say, about COVID-19 might be so great that we just shove it aside and deny it completely. And that might look like just pretending that it doesn't exist at all and not taking any precautions whatsoever. Some other signs you may need some additional help or support when it comes to COVID-19 and anxiety. You can't think about anything else other than COVID-19. It's on your mind 24/7. That the anxiety interferes with your daily life and your daily functioning, really important. You might begin to feel hopelessness or real anger about COVID-19. That's difficult to contain and difficult to hold together. You might have difficulty with eating or sleeping, or physical symptoms like frequent headaches or an upset stomach. These last two, the issues with appetite and sleep and having a headache and an upset stomach, we call that somaticizing. And I want to assure you that if you do in fact have these symptoms, they're absolutely real. It's not all in your head. They're not fake. You really do feel these things. It's simply that they might have a psychological basis because stress hormones are released, cortisol is released, our attention is greater in our bodies. it's going to have an impact on our bodies as well. So don't be surprised if you also get physical symptoms that accompany your psychological symptoms, okay? So what can we do? We can take a middle ground. And why not take a middle ground? And that might look like this. We can be concerned that we are in the midst of a pandemic, but we need not feel catastrophic about it, that it's not the end of the world. Okay, we can be proactive about it. We can practice good hygiene by washing our hands, and we can stay home when we're feeling sick, and we can make plans if in fact we have to self-isolate. That's really important because the more proactive we are, the greater sense of mastery we have over feeling anxious about COVID-19. So what can we do about mediating this COVID-19 anxiety? Well, I'm going to tell you some things that I've told you before, and don't just roll your eyes and say, oh, this is boring. They bear repeating because they're so important. Number one, to deal with COVID-19 and anxiety, you need to take care of yourself. What does that look like? You get good sleep hygiene, and you get good nutrition, and you do some exercise, and you take good care of your bodies. You want to take care of your mental health, you can do meditation, and you can do yoga and other ways to help calm the mind and quell any anxieties that begin to surface. I've said this before too, stay connected with family and friends through online video platforms. I can't emphasize this enough because what we do know about the impact of isolation, I talked about that in one of my earlier episodes, that it's not good for us. So even if it's once a day, reach out and talk to someone, and hopefully you can have a circle of people and you can reach out to one another. This is one of my favorites, helping others if you can. Why do I love this one so much? Let me tell you. When you help other people, it gets you out of your head. And if you're ruminating on something that makes you anxious, when you're helping someone, you don't think about that anxiety. Rather, you're thinking about the welfare of another person. So not only are you helping someone else who is in need, you're also helping yourself. And it's a way of treating yourself well. I highly, highly recommend that. Cut back on news and social media. I can't emphasize that enough. Of course, it's important to keep up with what's changing each day regarding restrictions and social distancing. But on the other hand, there is a point of no return in which the news may simply seem overly negative or overly anxiety protective of you. So what I suggest you do is you turn off the news, shut your laptop, and go engage in one of the activities that I've explained before, such as meditation, yoga, exercise, music, art, whatever you have to express yourself. And perhaps most importantly, and a friend gave me this idea, is to have some compassion. Compassion, compassion. If you are feeling the worst anxiety in the world over COVID-19 and it just feels like your world is crashing, remember to have some compassion and love for yourself, that this is understandable and it's okay. And even if you go for help, have some compassion for yourself. And if you have loved ones who are really suffering with anxiety over this, have some compassion for them. And remember that what they might be going through might be really quite rough. So I want to turn anxiety on its head a little bit. And I would love personally to take full credit for this, but I can't. Okay, this is by Dr. Dan Martinson out of Virginia Tech. And he has come up with 5 steps to kind of take anxiety and make it go from working against you to make it work for you. So the first step is to recognize your anxious feelings and thoughts and physical feelings. So you're going to try to identify the anxiety in your body and in your mind and emotionally. Okay, let me give you an example. And I will give you an example that is related to COVID-19. Okay, let's say I go outside and let's say I forget to wear a mask, and let's say somebody sneezes and coughs right next to me. Okay, so I walk upstairs and I am nervous as all get out. So what's going on here? Well, my thoughts, my cognition says, oh my God, what have I done? I'm going to catch COVID-19 now. The emotion is terrible, terrible worry. The physical is I feel my heart pound, my stomach is churning, my muscles are tight, and I'm beginning to sweat. Now, once I do this, once I can accurately identify the physical, the emotional, and the cognitive, now I can respond. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to slow down and press pause. I don't want you to run away from your thoughts and your feelings you are noticing. I want you to keep them with you. Don't deny them. Keep them with you. And I want you to sit down and I want you to do some deep breathing, okay? People like to do this in different ways. You can inhale for a count of 3 to 4, hold for 1 and 2, and exhale for 3 to 4, all the while keeping the thoughts and the feelings in your mind. And while you begin to calm, which you will begin to calm yourself down, I want you to ask yourself if these feelings and thoughts are helpful now. Are these feelings and thoughts helpful to you? If they are helpful to you, well, that's fantastic. It could be the energy and motivation you need to face whatever precedes you. Great. But what if they're unhelpful? So, for example, if I forgot my mask and someone sneezed and coughed, and all I can do is worry, maybe that isn't necessarily helpful. In fact, it's turning into something unhelpful completely. So what do? I'm going to step out from under the anxiety spiral, okay? I'm going to take a break. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do one of the many activities that I mentioned above, such as meditation, yoga with Fantasia, exercise, something, again, to break this cycle of anxiety. Keep your focus in the present moment. And as well, continue to be open and aware of your feelings and thoughts. So let's say if I'm doing some meditation and I'm thinking to myself, I'm starting to calm down. Really, what are the chances of someone coughing and sneezing and actually having it? And how far away was I really? Wasn't I actually socially distancing? You can actually begin to sort of get a sense of what the reality is once your body has calmed down. Once, or if you, in fact, you feel better, get back to the things that are important and necessary. Now, if you notice your anxiety building again to an unhelpful place, then you're going to go back to number 1, and you're going to identify what your physical and emotional and bodily anxiety is, and go through the process. And what this process does, at least in my opinion, is that it allows for a sense of mastery, that you begin to introspect and get a sense of what actually makes up the components of your anxiety. And once you get a handle on that, you sort of break them down into chunks and you're able to manage them better. If you have a pounding heart like I get and a dropped stomach, I find that deep breathing does wonders for me, and it allows my mind to be free, and it allows my mind to explore what is it exactly that's making me anxious. Okay, so that is my talk for today. I want to thank you so much, and if there are any questions, please bring them on. I'm happy to answer them. Let's see. Here's a good one. What type of mindfulness meditation exercises do you suggest for someone who is a beginner or who is resistant to these types of exercises? That's a great question. Personally, I have been quite resistant to it because I have a real difficulty sitting still. And what I found actually, because I have struggled with meditation and I've taken meditation classes and I'm a complete squirm bug the entire time. Just sitting and breathing in for a count of 3, 4, hold it for 2, and exhale. Something as simplistic as that, where I don't have to put a lot of thought in, is a great start. That really, really works for me. And the fact that Dr. Martinson thought the same thing, that was nice serendipity there. And then what I would do, and I recommend this, is that I recommend going onto YouTube and looking up different meditations that you might like. It might be accompanied to music, or it might be a spoken meditation. Sometimes a spoken word meditation in terms of how you're breathing and uh, how you're thinking and how to deal with those intrusive thoughts, I find very, very helpful and very, very relaxing. If I am having a panic attack, what can I do to calm my anxiety? Well, panic attacks are a whole different breed. Unfortunately, I can't get into today. But what I can tell you is that even starting uh, deep breathing exercises, because a lot of times with a panic attack, it starts with shallow breaths, and then we begin to feel like we hyperventilate. If we can sort of cut that um, cycle of shallow breathing into longer breaths, and then you're getting more oxygen to your muscles, and they might not feel so tingly, and your heart then slows down. That might be able to help. But I do find that deep breathing exercises are a great first start to dealing with the anxiety that comes with a panic attack. And panic attacks are quite scary because they happen unawares, almost always unannounced. They just happen upon you. But if you have the tools, and what I'll do too is I will put in the comments when I'm done some really good information about panic attacks that I've used with clients that I have found to be incredibly helpful. All right, let's see. My anxiety has always motivated me to do work hard in school and at work. Absolutely. It is like my anxiety is a coping mechanism in itself. How do I find another way to motivate myself that isn't anxiety? Oh, what a fantastic question. Well, it might be an issue here of reframing, okay? You have to figure out, what is the actual anxiety? Is it, if I don't get this done, then my world will fall apart? It might have to be a different way in which you think about how you motivate yourself to do the work that you need to do, okay? Um, because a lot of our anxiety, again, is mediated by our cognition, by our thoughts, and it's usually somewhere in the realm of catastrophic thinking of, if I don't do so and so, then the world will end, or the most terrible thing will happen. And even though that, if that is what it is, that can be incredibly motivating, it's not necessarily healthy. So what I would say, begin to introspect and think about what it is you're actually thinking while you're motivating yourself to do your work. And could there be another way you could motivate yourself, such as, I'm motivated to do my work because, well, I love it so much, and I love doing A, B, and C, and it's important work to me. I would try something like that. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, if you think you have an anxiety disorder, who do you talk to? Well, I treat a lot of anxiety disorders, so I could say you can talk to a psychologist, you can talk to a counselor, you could talk to someone who is trained in dealing with anxiety disorders. And a lot of the symptoms that I mentioned are part and parcel to anxiety disorders, especially when they interfere with your daily life and functioning. But that's why I would recommend a licensed counselor or a psychologist, and then I would take it from there. I hope that helps. What can I do to help with my negative thoughts that lead to my anxiety? Well, this is sort of the art of catching the thought when it happens. And that can be an art form unto itself, and it's one that I have to catch. Here's an example. Before I got ready to do this Facebook Live, I found myself all of a sudden with these thoughts of, oh my God, I'm going to get 57 questions. They're all going to be exceedingly difficult, and I'm not going to know an answer to a single one of them. I have to stop. I have to stop there. And, now that I think about it, this is a cognitive issue for me, that I have to realize that no, even if I did get 57 challenging questions, even if I had to say I don't know to all of them, is that truly the end of the world? No, no, not at all. Not at all. So it's something to explore within yourself in terms of, what you're thinking when you begin to feel anxiety. Yes, absolutely. Catching maybe in a thought log or journal. Oh, journals are great for this, trying to figure out and break down your anxiety. Like you break it down into components because it makes your anxiety more manageable. When you just feel anxiety and you feel the onslaughts of the thoughts and the emotions and the physicality, it becomes this amorphous blob of discomfort, and nobody wants that. So yes, big fan of a thought log journal. Looks like one more. I feel like my anxiety makes me seem too sensitive. How do I calm my anxiety in social situations or work situations without seeming too emotional or like a pushover? Uh, I relate to that one very, very much. Um, I think I find that before I go into social situations, I have to do some form of meditation or deep breathing. That's the only way I can get through, even if I'm still getting ready for something or I'm putting on makeup, I just have to do some deep breaths and remind myself that I'm not walking into a lion's den here. I'm just walking into a place with people. And frankly, I think some of us are really sensitive. I'm incredibly sensitive. I've always been incredibly sensitive. I was always that kid who cried at school and I could never control it. I have tried for most of my life to make this sensitivity work for me as a psychologist, and I think it has. But a lot of that's biologically driven, I believe. Maybe not all, because we're all incredibly complex individuals, as complex as the double helix of a DNA. But, to maybe begin to accept the fact that you are a sensitive individual. And that's a beautiful trait to have because it is very likely, perhaps, that you're incredibly empathic towards others and that you deeply, deeply care about others. I think it's wonderful and nothing that I would say to necessarily get rid of. But if you want to not appear so sensitive to the world, then I would find ways in order to relax yourself. Yoga is fantastic for that. Deep breathing and meditation is fantastic for that because a lot of it is our biology and it's amped up, and we just want to bring it down a notch so we're able to think and function to the best of our abilities. Okay. Well, it looks like we are actually out of questions here. So, on that note, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Dr. Dana Wasserman, and this has been Tough Talk with Dr. Dana. Thanks so much. Bye bye.